The first time I saw Jamie paint a rainbow on his mailbox, I thought my dad would burn the neighborhood down. Tom Harris, my father, was a man of steel and spite. His heart welded shut against anything that didn't fit his narrow view of normal. At 17, I was caught in his shadow, but something about that rainbow bold, unapologetic pulled me like a magnet. We lived in Willow Creek, a sleepy Ohio town where pickup trucks and church suppers defined life. Our street, Maple Lane, was a row of tidy lawns and American flags. Except for Jamie's house. He'd moved in 3 months ago. A 19-year-old artist with a laugh that carried across the block and a rainbow flag pinned to his porch. Dad called him that kid with a sneer, as if Jamie's existence was a personal insult. Stay away from him, Ethan. He'd warned, his voice low and sharp like a blade. But I couldn't. Jamie's porch was my escape. At night, when Dad thought I was asleep, I'd slip out my window, heart pounding, and cross the 50 feet to Jamie's yard. He'd be there, strumming his guitar or sketching under the glow of a single bulb, his dark eyes catching mine like he knew I was coming. "You're late, small town," he'd tease, his voice warm, like honey over gravel. We'd talk for hours about music, art, the world beyond Willow Creek. He'd tell me about growing up in Chicago, where he'd come out at 16 and learn to dodge fists and slurs. I'd tell him about Dad's temper, about the weight of being the son he wanted but couldn't quite be. That summer, I was drowning. Dad's rules were a noose. Get good grades. Join the football team. Be the man he raised me to be. But I wasn't that guy. I didn't know who I was. Only that Jamie's laugh made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. The first time he touched my hand, showing me how to hold a paintbrush, I froze. His fingers were warm, steady, and I wanted to hold on forever. "You're shaking," he said softly, not letting go. I didn't tell him it wasn't the paintbrush. Dad's hatred for Jamie wasn't subtle. He'd mutter about those people ruining the town, his voice loud enough to carry through our thin walls. Once, when Jamie waved at me from his porch, Dad grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. "Don't you dare," he hissed. I nodded, but that night, I snuck over anyway. Jamie was waiting, his sketchbook open to a drawing of Mimosy hair. Shy smile, eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. "This is how I see you," he said, and I felt like I could breathe for the first time. Willow Creek's annual 4th of July barbecue was where things started to crack. The whole town gathered at the park. Kids running wild, burgers sizzling, flags everywhere. Jamie showed up in a tie-dye shirt with a tiny rainbow pin, and Dad's face turned to stone. I watched from the picnic tables as Jamie laughed with Mrs. Carter, our librarian, who didn't care about his flag or his past. Dad, though, was a storm waiting to break. "He doesn't belong here," he muttered to Mr. Reynolds, the hardware store owner. I wanted to scream, to tell him Jamie belonged more than anyone, but I stayed quiet, my cowardice burning. That night, I snuck over again. Jamie was quieter than usual, his guitar untouched. "Your dad hates me," he said, staring at the stars. "I'm used to it, but it stings, you know." I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I wasn't like Dad, but the words stuck. Instead, I sat closer, our shoulders brushing. "You don't have to be him," Jamie whispered, and I wondered if he could hear my heart racing. The summer stretched on, and so did my secret visits. Jamie taught me to paint, to see beauty in messy lines and bold colors. He told me about his first love, a boy in Chicago who broke his heart but taught him to be fearless. I told him about the time I cried after Dad yelled at me for dropping a pass in football, how I'd locked myself in my room and wondered why I couldn't be enough. Jamie listened, his eyes soft, and I realized I was falling for him hard. Fast. Terrifying. By August, Dad's suspicion grew. He'd check my room at night, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. I got better at sneaking out, but the fear of getting caught was a constant weight. Jamie noticed. "You don't have to keep coming," he said one night, his voice gentle but sad. "I don't want you in trouble." I shook my head, desperate. "You're the only thing that makes sense." His smile was small, but it lit up the dark. The night everything changed started like any other. Dad was at a town council meeting, ranting about neighborhood standards. I slipped out, the air thick with summer heat, and found Jamie on his porch, painting a canvas that looked like a storm of colors: blues, reds, purples, like the chaos in my head. "What's this one?" I asked, sitting beside him. He looked at me, his eyes searching. "It's us," he said simply. My breath caught, and before I could think, I leaned in. His lips were soft, warm, and for a moment, the world was perfect. Then I heard the crunch of gravel. Dad's truck was in the driveway, headlights off. He was home early, and he was walking toward us. The air turned to ice as Dad's silhouette loomed in the dim glow of Jamie's porch light. His boots crunched on the gravel, each step a hammer strike to my heart. I pulled back from Jamie, my lips still tingling from our kiss. But the warmth was gone, replaced by a dread so heavy I could barely breathe. "Ethan." Dad's voice was a low growl, sharp enough to cut through the humid night. He stood at the edge of Jamie's yard, his broad frame filling the space like a storm cloud. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, burned with something worse: betrayal. Jamie stood, his hand brushing mine for a fleeting second, a silent promise he was still there. "Get over here. Now." I wanted to run, to grab Jamie's hand and disappear into the night. But my legs were lead. "Dad," and my voice cracked, weak against his fury. Jamie stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Mr. Harris, this isn't what you think." His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes, the kind that came from years of facing men like my father. "Don't you dare speak to me," Dad snapped, pointing a finger like a loaded gun. "You've been poisoning my son, turning him into one of you." The word "you" dripped with venom, and I felt it like a slap. Jamie didn't flinch, but I did. I wanted to scream that I wasn't poisoned, that Jamie was the only one who saw me, but the words stayed locked in my throat. Dad grabbed my arm, his grip bruising, and yanked me toward our house. I stumbled, glancing back at Jamie, who stood frozen, his fists clenched. "I'm sorry," I mouthed, but he just shook his head, his eyes saying, "Don't be." The walk back was silent, Dad's anger a living thing between us. When we got inside, he slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. "What the hell were you doing with him?" he demanded, his face red, veins bulging. I stood in the living room, the same room where we'd watched football games and eaten silent dinners, now a battlefield. "I was just talking," I lied, my voice barely a whisper. He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Talking? You think I'm stupid? I saw you, Ethan. I saw what you were doing." My stomach twisted. He'd seen the kiss. I wanted to sink through the floor, to disappear. "It's not what you think," I said, echoing Jamie's words, but they felt hollow. Dad stepped closer, his breath hot with rage. "You're my son. You're not like that. You're not gonna throw your life away for some freak who paints rainbows and thinks he's better than us." "He's not a freak." The words burst out before I could stop them. Dad froze, his eyes narrowing. What did you say? I swallowed, my heart pounding so loud I thought it'd burst. Jamie's not a freak. He's my friend. The lie tasted bitter. Jamie was more than that, but I wasn't brave enough to say it. Dad's hand shot out, grabbing my shirt collar. You listen to me, he hissed. You stay away from that boy, or I'll make sure he's gone. You hear me? Gone. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I was scared not just for me, but for Jamie. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the kiss, Dad's rage, Jamie's steady hand. I wanted to go back, to tell Jamie I wasn't ashamed, but Dad's threat echoed in my head. The next morning, he was waiting at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched. You're grounded, he said flatly. No phone, no leaving the house except for school. And if I catch you near that kid again, you'll regret it. I nodded, my throat tight, but my mind was already racing, planning my next escape. School was torture. Willow Creek High was small, and gossip spread like wildfire. By lunch, whispers followed methods saying they'd seen me at Jamie's, speculating about what we were doing. Kept my head down, but every glance felt like a blade. Jamie didn't go to our school, graduated early, and was taking art classes at the community college, but I knew he'd hear the rumors too. I wanted to find him, to explain, but Dad's eyes seemed to follow me everywhere. That night, I waited until Dad's snores filled the house. I slipped out, quieter than ever, and ran to Jamie's. He was on the porch, sketching, his face lit by moonlight. You came, he said, relief softening his voice. I nodded, my chest tight. I'm sorry about last night. My dad, Jamie cut me off, his hand on mine. You don't have to explain. I know what he's like. He paused, his eyes searching mine. But you're here. That's what matters. We sat close, the night wrapping around us. Jamie told me about a gallery in Columbus that wanted his art. How he dreamed of leaving Willow Creek but worried about leaving me. I don't want you to stay for me, I said, though the thought of him leaving hurt. He smiled, sad and sweet. I'm not going anywhere yet. Small town. We kissed again, slower this time, and for a moment, I forgot about Dad, about the town, about everything but us. But the world doesn't let you forget. The next day, Dad was waiting when I got home from school. Mrs. Carter saw you last night, he said, his voice dangerously calm. You think you can sneak around behind my back? My heart sank. He'd been watching, or someone had. Willow Creek was a trap, and I was caught. Dad's eyes were cold steel, pinning me in place. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls closing in as he leaned forward, his voice a low growl. You're done with him, Ethan. Done. I wanted to argue, to tell him he couldn't control me, but the look in his eyes, the kind that promised consequences, kept me silent. He didn't just hate Jamie. He hated what Jamie represented, what I was starting to admit to myself. That night, he took my phone, locked the windows, and nailed my bedroom door shut from the outside. For your own good, he said, as if love was a disease he could cure with a hammer. But love doesn't bend to nails or locks. The next night, I pried the window open with a screwdriver I'd hidden under my mattress. The wood splintered, but I didn't care. I needed to see Jamie, to know he was okay, to know we were okay. I ran across the dew-soaked grass, my sneakers silent, and found him on his porch, his sketchbook closed for once. Ethan, he whispered, pulling me into a hug. His arms were warm, safe. and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing him in. "I can't keep doing this," I said, my voice muffled. "He's going to find out again." Jamie pulled back, his hands cupping my face. "Then let him. You're not his prisoner, Ethan. You're allowed to feel what you feel." His words were a lifeline, but they also terrified me. What I felt for Jamie was bigger than Willow Creek, bigger than Dad, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to carry it. We sat on the porch swing, the creak of the chains the only sound. Jamie told me about his mom, who'd accepted him when he came out but died of cancer 2 years later. "She'd have liked you," he said, his voice soft. "She always said love was worth fighting for." I wanted to believe that, but fighting Dad felt like fighting a mountain. I leaned against Jamie, his heartbeat steady under my ear, and for a moment, I let myself dream of a world where we didn't have to hide. School became a minefield. The rumors had grown, twisted by small-town boredom into something ugly. "Ethan's got a boyfriend," some jock whispered in the hallway, loud enough for everyone to hear. I ignored it, but the words burned. At home, Dad was a ghost, silent but watching, his distrust a weight I carried everywhere. I stopped going to football practice and faced the locker room stairs, and Coach called Dad, which only made things worse. One night, I overheard Dad on the phone with Mr. Reynolds, talking about getting rid of that kid. My blood ran cold. I didn't know if he meant Jamie or me, but the threat was real. I snuck out again, my heart in my throat, and told Jamie everything. He listened, his face calm but his eyes dark. "I've dealt with worse," he said, but I could hear the strain in his voice. "We'll figure it out, Ethan. Together." Together. The word was a promise, but it also felt like a dare. I kissed him, desperate, like I could hold on to him forever if I tried hard enough. But when I got home, Dad was waiting. He didn't yell this time. He just looked at me, his face a mask of disappointment. "You're choosing him over your family," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer, but the silence said enough. The next week was a blur of tension. Dad barely spoke to me, and I avoided Jamie's house, not because I wanted to, but because I was scared of what Dad might do. Jamie texted me from a burner phone he'd gotten. Short messages like, "I'm here," and "Don't give up." I clung to them like lifelines, reading them in the dark when Dad thought I was asleep. Then came the town fair. Willow Creek went all-out carnival rides. Cotton candy. A talent show where Jamie was set to perform. I begged Dad to let me go, promising to stay away from Jamie. He agreed, but his eyes said he didn't trust me. At the fair, I saw Jamie on stage, his guitar strapped across his chest, singing a song he'd written about freedom and love. His voice was raw, beautiful, and I couldn't look away. The crowd cheered, but I saw Dad in the back, his arms crossed, his face a storm. After the performance, I found Jamie by the Ferris wheel. "You were amazing," I said, my voice shaking. He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your dad was watching," he said. "He's not going to let this go, is he?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "I don't care. I lied. I choose you." Jamie's hand found mine, hidden in the shadows of the ride, and for a moment, we were untouchable. But Dad was always watching. That night, he followed me home from the fair. I didn't know it then, but he'd seen us by the Ferris wheel, seen the way I looked at Jamie. When I got to my room, the window was boarded shut, and on my desk was a note in Dad's handwriting. "This ends now." The note on my desk was a guillotine. "This ends now." Dad's handwriting was sharp, final, like he'd carved the words into my future. I sat on my bed, the room suffocating, the boarded window a reminder that I was trapped not just in this house, but in his version of who I was supposed to be. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced with images of Jamie's smile, his paint-stained hands, the way he made me feel like I could be more than Willow Creek's expectations. But Dad's threat was a shadow over it all. What did this ends now mean? Would he hurt Jamie? Would he send me away? The fear was a knot in my chest, tightening with every breath. The next morning, Dad was gone before I woke up, his truck missing from the driveway. I went to school, but my head wasn't there. I kept checking the burner phone Jamie had given me, but there were no new messages. By lunch, I couldn't take it anymore. I skipped my last class and biked to the community college where Jamie took his art classes. I found him in the studio, surrounded by canvases, his hands smudged with charcoal. "Ethan," he said, surprised but smiling. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," I said, my voice breaking. I told him about the note, about Dad's silence, about the fear that was eating me alive. Jamie listened, his eyes steady, and when I finished, he pulled me into a hug. "We'll figure it out," he said, but his voice was quieter now, like he was trying to convince himself too. That afternoon, we sat in the college's courtyard, hidden by a cluster of oak trees. Jamie sketched while I talked, spilling everything: how Dad's anger felt like a wall I'd never climb, how I was scared of losing him but more scared of losing myself. "You're not alone in this," Jamie said, his pencil pausing. "I've been through this before. It's hard, but you're stronger than you think." He showed me his sketch: a boy standing at a crossroads, one path bright with color, the other shadowed and gray. "That's you," he said. "You get to choose." I wanted to choose the bright path, the one with Jamie, but Dad's note kept pulling me back. When I got home, he was waiting in the living room, his face unreadable. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm but dangerous. I lied, said I'd been at the library, but he didn't believe me. "I called the school," he said. "You skipped class. You think I don't know where you went?" My heart stopped. "Dad," he cut me off, standing so fast the chair scraped the floor. "I told you to stay away from him. You're throwing your life away, Ethan." "For what?" "Some kid who's going to ruin you." His words were a punch, but I was done cowering. "He's not ruining me," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "He's the only one who gets me." Dad's face went white, then red. "You don't know what you're saying. You're confused, and he's taking advantage of you." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "I'm not confused. I know who I am when I'm with him." The words were out before I could stop them, raw and true. Dad stared at me like I was a stranger. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I didn't know where he went, but I knew it wasn't over. That night, I snuck out again, my hands trembling as I climbed over the backyard fence. Jamie was waiting, his porch light a beacon in the dark. "You okay?" he asked, pulling me close. I shook my head, unable to speak. He didn't push, just held me, his warmth grounding me. "We can't keep hiding," he said finally. "You need to tell him the truth. All of it." The thought of coming out to Dad was like standing on the edge of a cliff. "He'll hate me," I whispered. Jamie's fingers brushed my cheek. "He might. But you can't live for him. You have to live for you." His words were a spark, igniting something in me, a resolve I didn't know I had. The next day, I found Dad in the garage, tinkering with his truck. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk." He didn't look up, but his hands stilled. "I'm gay," I said, the words heavy but freeing. "And I love Jamie." The silence was deafening. When Dad finally looked at me, his eyes were empty. "Get out," he said. "You're not my son." I left, my heart shattered but my head high. I went to Jamie's, and he held me as I cried. "You're enough," he whispered. "You're more than enough." But as we sat there, I heard the crunch of gravel again. Dad was outside, and this time, he wasn't alone. The gravel crunched like a warning shot. Dad stood in Jamie's driveway, flanked by Mr. Reynolds and another man from the town council, their faces grim under the streetlight. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stepped onto the porch, Jamie's hand tight in mine. This wasn't just Dad's anger, Anna Maria, it was Willow Creek's judgment. Come to collect. "Ethan, get over here," Dad barked, his voice carrying the weight of a command I'd once obeyed without question. Mr. Reynolds shifted, his eyes flicking to Jamie with disgust. The other man, a burly guy named Carl who owned the diner, crossed his arms, his stance a silent threat. Jamie squeezed my hand, his voice low. "Stay calm. They can't hurt us." But I wasn't so sure. Dad took a step forward, his fists clenched. "I told you to stay away from him. Now look at you disgracing your family, this town." His words were a blade, but I was done bleeding. "I'm not disgracing anyone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm being honest. You're the one who can't handle it." Jamie's grip tightened, a silent "I'm proud of you." Mr. Reynolds snorted. "This ain't about honesty, kid. It's about right and wrong. People like him," he jerked his head at Jamie, "don't belong here." Jamie's jaw clenched, but he didn't back down. "I've heard that before," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "But I'm not going anywhere. And neither is Ethan. Unless he wants to." Dad's face twisted, a mix of rage and something deeper pain. "Maybe. You're my son," he said, almost pleading. "I raised you better than this." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "You raised me to hide. Jamie taught me to live." The words hung between us, heavy and final. For a moment, I thought Dad might break. But then Carl stepped forward, his voice low. "You're causing trouble, kid. Both of you. Leave town, or we'll make it hard for you." The threat was real, and it chilled me. Willow Creek was small, but its grip was tight. Jamie's hand in mine was the only thing keeping me grounded. "We're not doing anything wrong," I said, my voice shaking but loud. "You can't scare us away." Dad's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something like fear in them, not of me, but of losing me. The standoff ended when Mrs. Carter, the librarian, appeared from her porch across the street. "Tom Harris, you leave those boys alone," she shouted, her voice sharp and fearless. "This isn't your town to bully." Dad froze, caught off guard. Mr. Reynolds muttered something, but Carl backed off, his bravado fading. Mrs. Carter walked over, her gray hair glinting under the streetlight. "Jamie's a good kid, and so is Ethan. You ought to be ashamed, ganging up like this." Dad didn't respond. He just turned and walked back to his truck, Mr. Reynolds and Carl trailing behind. But his silence wasn't surrender, it was a storm brewing. Jamie pulled me inside, his hands shaking as he locked the door. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, but I wasn't. I stood up to Dad. But the cost was coming. The next few days were a blur of whispers and glares. The school. The rumors had solidified into truth. Ethan Harris was gay. And the town had opinions. Some kids avoided me. Others, like my friend Sarah, stood by me, her fierce loyalty a small light in the dark. Dad barely spoke, but his presence was a weight, his disapproval suffocating. I kept sneaking to Jamie's, our time together a stolen refuge. We'd paint, talk, kiss, and for those hours, I could forget the world outside. But Willow Creek wasn't done with us. One night, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. I ran to the window and saw Jamie's mailbox, the one with the rainbow, smashed to pieces in his yard. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my jacket and ran to his house, not caring if Dad heard. Jamie was outside, staring at the wreckage, his face pale. "They're not going to stop," he said, his voice hollow. I grabbed his hand, desperate. "We'll fix it. Together." We spent the night cleaning up, taping the mailbox back together, repainting the rainbow. Jamie's hands shook as he worked, but he didn't cry. "I've seen worse," he said, but I knew it hurt. When we finished, the mailbox was crooked but defiant, a symbol of us. I kissed him under the stars, my heart full and breaking at the same time. The next day, Dad confronted me. "You're choosing him over everything," he said, his voice low, almost broken. "You're throwing away your future." I looked at him, really looked, and saw a man scared of a world he didn't understand. "My future's with him," I said. "And if you can't accept that, you're the one throwing me away." He didn't respond, just walked away. But I knew the fight wasn't over. The smashed mailbox was just the beginning. Willow Creek's anger simmered, a quiet venom that seeped into every glance, every whisper. Jamie and I were a spark in a town ready to burn, and I could feel the heat closing in. Dad stopped talking to me altogether. The house was a tomb, silent except for the creak of floorboards and the clink of his beer bottles. I catch him staring at me sometimes, his eyes a mix of anger and something softer regret. Maybe, or confusion. I wanted to reach him, to make him see me, but the wall between us was too high. Jamie was my anchor, his porch my sanctuary. We'd sit there at night, his guitar soft, his voice a shield against the world. "You're braver than you know," he'd say, and I'd try to believe him. School was worse. The jocks who'd once high-fived me now shoved me in the halls, their slurs sharp and careless. Sarah stuck by me, her glare enough to keep most of them at bay. But even she couldn't stop the rumors. "Your dad's losing it," she told me one day, her voice low. "He's been talking to the council about cleaning up the town." My stomach twisted. I knew what that meant, Jamie. I told Jamie that night, my words tumbling out in a panic. He listened, his face calm but his eyes dark. "I've been through this before," he said. "Small towns, small minds. But I'm not running, Ethan. Not unless you want me to." I shook my head, tears burning. "I want you here. I need you here." He pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead. "Then I'm staying." But staying wasn't easy. The next week, someone spray-painted a slur on Jamie's garage door. I helped him scrub it off, my hands shaking with rage. Mrs. Carter saw us and brought over paint to cover it, her face tight with anger. "This town's better than this," she said, but I wasn't so sure. Jamie thanked her, his smile forced, and I could see the weight on him, the toll of being the target. I started skipping school to spend more time with him, helping with his art, learning to mix colors and see the world through his eyes. He was working on a piece for the Columbus Galleria vibrant canvas of two figures holding hands against a storm. "It's us," he said, his voice soft. "No matter what happens, this is us." I kissed him, my heart aching with love and fear. Dad's silence broke one night in a way I didn't expect. I came home to find him in the living room, a photo album open on his lap. It was pictures of me as a kid smiling at a fishing trip, riding my first bike, Mom laughing beside me before she left when I was 10. "You were happy then," he said, his voice raw. "What happened?" I sat across from him, my throat tight. "I'm still happy, Dad. Just not the way you want." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I don't understand you," he said. "I don't understand this thing with that boy." I took a deep breath, the words heavy but necessary. "It's not a thing. It's love. And if you can't see that, you don't see me." He didn't respond, just closed the album and walked away. But for the first time, I felt a crack in his armor. The crack didn't last. The next day, I heard Dad on the phone again, his voice low and urgent. "We need to do something about that kid. He's corrupting my son." My blood ran cold. I didn't know who he was talking to, but I knew Jamie was in danger. I ran to his house, my heart pounding. "You need to be careful," I said, breathless. "Dad's planning something." Jamie's face hardened, but he nodded. "I've got people watching out for me. Mrs. Carter, some friends from college. I'm not alone." That night, we made a plan. If things got worse, we'd leave together. Columbus, maybe, or somewhere farther where we could be free. The idea was terrifying but exhilarating. A future where we didn't have to hide. We sealed it with a kiss, fierce and desperate, under the stars. But plans don't stop storms. The next morning, I woke to sirens. Jamie's house was surrounded by police cars, their lights flashing red and blue. My heart stopped. I ran outside, ignoring Dad's shout to stay put. Jamie was on his porch, hands raised, an officer yelling at him to stay still. A crowd had gathered. Mr. Reynolds, Carl, others, their faces smug. And Dad was there, watching, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" I demanded, pushing through. The officer glanced at me, then at Jamie. "Vandalism," he said. "Someone reported him for defacing public property." It was a lie, and I knew who'd started it. I turned to Dad, my voice shaking. "You did this." He didn't deny it, just looked away. The police lights painted Jamie's porch in harsh red and blue, turning his home into a crime scene. My chest burned as I stared at Dad, his face a mask of cold determination. He'd done this, set Jamie up, turned our love into a weapon against him. I wanted to scream, to make him see the damage, but the words wouldn't come. "Ethan, go home," Dad said, his voice flat, like he hadn't just torn my world apart. I ignored him, pushing past the crowd to Jamie's side. The officer, a gruff man named Officer Daniels, held up a hand. "Stay back, kid. This doesn't concern you." But it did. It was everything. Jamie's eyes met mine, calm but tired, and he gave a small nod, as if to say, "I'm okay." But he wasn't. None of us were. The vandalism charge was flimsy. Someone claimed Jamie had spray-painted a wall downtown. But there was no proof, just whispers from Dad's allies. Mrs. Carter was there, arguing with Officer Daniels, her voice sharp. "This is harassment, and you know it. That boy's done nothing but make this town brighter." The officer shrugged, but I could see the unease in his eyes. He didn't want to be here, but someone Dad probably had pulled strings. They didn't arrest Jamie. Not yet. But they took him to the station for questioning. I followed, ignoring Dad's shouts, my bike wobbling as I pedaled after the police car. At the station, I waited in the cold lobby, my hands shaking. Sarah showed up, her face pale but fierce. "I heard what happened," she said, sitting beside me. "Your dad's gone too far." I nodded, too numb to speak. She stayed, her presence a quiet strength. Jamie came out an hour later, his expression weary but unbroken. "They've got nothing," he said, sitting next to me. "Just trying to scare me." I grabbed his hand, not caring who saw. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. He shook his head, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "This isn't your fault, Ethan. It's theirs." We went back to his house, the crowd gone but the tension lingering. Mrs. Carter was waiting, a thermos of coffee in hand. "You boys need anything, you call me," she said, her eyes fierce. We nodded, grateful, and she left us alone. Inside, Jamie collapsed on the couch, his head in his hands. "I thought I could handle this," he said, his voice breaking. "But it's hard, Ethan. It's really hard." I sat beside him, my hand on his back. "We'll get through this," I said, echoing his words from weeks ago. "Together." He looked at me, his eyes wet but warm. "You're worth it," he said, and kissed me, slow and desperate, like he was holding on to me for dear life. The next day, the town was buzzing. The vandalism charge didn't stick, but the damage was done. People stared at Jamie like he was a criminal, and I got the same looks at school. Dad was home when I got back, his face a storm. "You're making a fool of yourself," he said, running after that boy like some lovesick puppy. I stood tall, my voice steady. "I love him, Dad, and I'm not ashamed." He flinched, like I'd hit him, and for a moment, I thought he'd yell. But he just walked away. The weeks that followed were a tightrope. Jamie and I kept our distance in public. But at night, we'd meet in secret, our moments stolen but precious. He worked on his art, pouring his pain into every stroke, while I tried to navigate school and Dad's silent rage. Sarah and Mrs. Carter became our allies, spreading word that Jamie was innocent, that the town's hatred was wrong. Slowly, a few others kids from school, the barista at the coffee shop started to speak up too. But Dad wasn't done. One night, I overheard him talking to Carl in the garage. "If the police won't do it, we will," he said, his voice low. "That kid's gotta go." My heart stopped. I didn't know what they were planning, but I knew it was bad. I ran to Jamie's, my breath ragged, and told him everything. His face hardened, but he didn't panic. "We need to be smart," he said. "Document everything. If they come for me, we'll have proof." We spent the night writing down every incident, the mailbox, the slur, the police visit. Jamie called a friend in Columbus, a lawyer who worked with LGBT rights, and she promised to help if things escalated. Felt like we were preparing for war, but Jamie's strength kept me grounded. "We're not just fighting for us," he said. "We're fighting for everyone who's been told they don't belong." The next morning, I found a note on my bike, slipped under the handlebar. It was Dad's handwriting. "Meet me at the park. Noon. Alone." My stomach dropped. I didn't tell Jamie I didn't want to worry him. But as I rode to the park, I knew something was about to break. The park was quiet at noon, the swings creaking in the breeze, the air thick with the scent of cut grass. Dad stood by the old oak tree, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. I parked my bike, my heart pounding, unsure if this was a trap or a chance to finally talk. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, almost soft. I didn't want it to come to this. I braced myself, expecting another lecture, another threat. But he looked tired, his shoulders slumped, like the fight was draining him too. "I don't understand you," he said. "But I'm trying to." My breath caught. Was this real, or just another way to pull me back? He gestured to a bench, and we sat, the silence heavy between us. "When your mom left," he started, his voice rough, "I swore I'd protect you, make you strong. But all I've done is push you away." I stared at him, shocked. Dad never talked about Mom, never showed weakness. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "This thing with Jamie scares me." "It's not a thing," I said, my voice steady. "It's who I am." He winced, but didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Does he make you happy?" The question caught me off guard, and I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Happier than I've ever been." Dad looked away, his jaw tight, but he didn't yell. He just nodded, like he was trying to process it. The conversation wasn't a fix, but it was a crack in the wall. When I got home, Dad didn't lock my window or take my phone. Felt like a truce, fragile but real. I told Jamie that night, and he smiled, cautious but hopeful. "Maybe he's starting to see you," he said. I wanted to believe it, but I knew Dad's pride ran deep. The town, though, wasn't ready to let go. The next week, someone slashed Jamie's tires. We found them in the morning, the rubber shredded, a message carved into his car: "Leave." Jamie's face was stone, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. We reported it to the police, but Officer Daniels just shrugged, saying they'd look into it. I knew they wouldn't. Mrs. Carter rallied the allies she'd gathered: Sarah, the barista, a few kids from Jamie's art class. They helped us replace the tires, their support a small but fierce light. Jamie painted a new canvas that night, a phoenix rising from flames, its wings rainbow bright. "This is us," he said, his voice steady. "They can try to break us, but we'll keep rising." School was a battleground. The jocks were bolder now, shoving me into lockers, whispering slurs. Sarah got into a shouting match with one of them, earning a detention but no regrets. "You're my best friend," she told me later, her eyes fierce. "I'm not letting them win." Her loyalty kept me going, but the weight of the town's hatred was crushing. Jamie and I started planning for real Columbus, a new start. He'd been accepted to an art program there, and I could finish high school online. The idea of leaving was terrifying, but staying was worse. We saved money, hid it in a tin under Jamie's floorboards, and dreamed of a life where we didn't have to look over our shoulders. But Dad's truce didn't last. One night, I came home to find him in the garage with Carl and Mr. Reynolds, their voices low and angry. "We can't let this go on," Carl said. "That kid's a problem." Dad didn't respond, but his silence was agreement. I backed away, my heart racing, and ran to Jamie's. "They're planning something," I said, breathless. "Something bad." Jamie nodded, his face grim. "We need to be ready." He called his lawyer friend again, who told us to keep documenting, to stay vigilant. We spent the night fortifying his house-locking windows, checking doors, setting up a cheap security camera Mrs. Carter had given us. Felt like preparing for a siege. But Jamie's hand in mine kept me steady. The next day, I confronted Dad. "What are you planning?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He looked surprised, then guilty. "I'm trying to protect you," he said, but it sounded hollow. "By hurting Jamie." I shot back. "You're not protecting me. You're destroying me." He didn't answer, just looked away, and I knew he wasn't ready to change. That night, I stayed at Jamie's, too scared to go home. We fell asleep on his couch, wrapped in each other, the world outside a distant threat. But in the morning, we woke to the smell of smoke. Jamie's porch was on fire, flames licking at the rainbow flag, and Dad's truck was in the driveway. The flames roared, devouring Jamie's porch, the rainbow flag curling into ash. I grabbed Jamie's arm, pulling him back as the heat stung our faces. "Call 911. I shouted, my voice raw with panic. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking, while I ran to the hose in his yard, spraying water at the fire. It wasn't enough, but it slowed the flames until sirens wailed in the distance. Dad's truck was still there, parked crookedly, like he'd left in a hurry. My heart twisted anger, fear, betrayal all at once. Had he done this? The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd bandaged my knees, who'd promised to protect me. The fire truck arrived, followed by police, and the neighbors spilled out, their faces a mix of shock and curiosity. "Mrs. Carter ran over, her robe flapping, and hugged us both. "You're okay," she kept saying, like a prayer. The firefighters put out the blaze, but the porch was ruin-charred wood, melted paint, the rainbow flag gone. Officer Daniels took our statements, his face skeptical. "Anyone see who did this?" he asked, glancing at Dad's truck. I wanted to scream that it was him, that he'd crossed a line, but I had no proof. Jamie squeezed my hand, his voice steady. "We have a camera. It's on the side of the house." My heart leapt. We'd forgotten about the security camera. The footage was grainy but clear enough. 3 figures in hoodies, one holding a gas can, another lighting a match. I recognized Carl's bulky frame and Mr. Reynolds' lanky walk. The third figure was harder to make out, but it wasn't Dad. Relief and guilt hit me at once. Hadn't lit the fire, but he'd been part of the hate that fueled it. Officer Daniels watched the footage, his face grim. "We'll handle it," he said, but I didn't trust him. Jamie's lawyer friend was already on her way from Columbus. Dad came home that morning, his face pale when he saw the fire trucks. "What happened?" he asked, but his eyes avoided mine. "You tell me," I said, my voice cold. He didn't answer, just went inside, the door slamming behind him. I stayed with Jamie, helping him clean up the wreckage, our hands black with soot. "We're leaving," Jamie said, his voice firm. "As soon as we can." I nodded, the decision heavy but right. The police arrested Carl and Mr. Reynolds that afternoon, the footage enough to charge them with arson. The town was split. Some called it justice. Others said Jamie had brought it on himself. Mrs. Carter organized a fundraiser to fix Jamie's porch, and Sarah spread the word at school, rallying more support than I'd expected. For every hateful stare, there was a kind word, a small sign that Willow Creek wasn't all venom. But Dad was a ghost. He didn't speak to me, didn't look at me. I found him one night in the garage, staring at an old photo of me and Mom. "I didn't want this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I was saving you." I sat beside him, my anger softened by his brokenness. "You can't save me by hurting him," I said. You're losing me instead. He nodded, tears in his eyes, but didn't say more. Jamie and I kept planning our escape. His art program in Columbus was starting soon, and I'd enrolled in online school. We had enough saved for a small apartment, a new beginning, but leaving meant facing Dad one last time. I wrote him a letter, pouring out everything me love for Jamie, my pain at his rejection, my hope that he'd one day understand. I left it on his pillow and packed my bags. The night before we left, Jamie's porch was quiet, the new wood still smelling of paint. We sat on the swing, his head on my shoulder, the stars above us bright and endless. You ready for this? He asked, his voice soft. I kissed him, my heart full. With you. Always. But as we sat there, I heard the crunch of gravel. Dad stood in the driveway, holding my letter, his face unreadable in the moonlight. My heart stopped. Was this the end? Or a new beginning? Dad stood in Jamie's driveway, the letter trembling in his hand. The moonlight cast shadows across his face, aging him, softening the hard lines I'd always feared. For the first time, I didn't know what he'd do, fight, or walk away. Jamie's hand found mine, steady and warm, anchoring me as I faced the man who'd shaped my world and nearly broken it. Ethan, Dad said, his voice rough, like he'd been crying. I read your letter. I braced myself, expecting anger, but his eyes were wet, his shoulders slumped. I don't understand this, he said, gesturing vaguely at us. I don't know how to be okay with it. But I don't want to lose you. The words hit like a wave, washing away some of the pain but not the scars. I stepped forward, Jamie's hand still in mine. You don't have to understand, I said, my voice steady. You just have to try. Jamie's not the enemy. He's the reason I'm still here. Dad's gaze flicked to Jamie, then back to me. For a moment, I thought he'd turn away, but he didn't. I didn't light that fire, he said, his voice breaking. But I didn't stop it either. I'm sorry. The apology was small, fragile, but it was a start. Jamie squeezed my hand, his eyes soft. We're leaving tomorrow, I told Dad. Columbus. A new start. He nodded, like he'd known it was coming. Can I see you? Sometimes. He asked, almost a whisper. I nodded, tears burning. If you can accept me. All of me. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said he'd try. We left Willow Creek the next morning, our bags packed in Jamie's beat-up car. Mrs. Carter hugged us goodbye, slipping us a wad of cash from the fundraiser. Sarah was there too, her eyes red but smiling. You better visit, she said, punching my arm. The town felt smaller as we drove away, its weight lifting with every mile. Jamie's hand rested on mine, his smile bright. We did it, he said. We're free. Columbus was a new world, bustling, colorful, alive. We found a tiny apartment above a coffee shop, its walls bare but full of promise. Jamie's art program was intense, his canvases filling our space with color and hope. I finished high school online, my days spent studying and exploring the city with him. We went to pride events, held hands in public, kissed without fear. It wasn't perfect, money was tight, and some days were hard, but it was ours. Dad called sometimes, awkward conversations that grew easier with time. He visited once, 6 months later, his eyes wide at the sight of our apartment. Jamie's paintings everywhere. You're happy, he said, more to himself than me. I nodded, showing him a canvas Jamie had painted of us 12 figures, hand in hand. against a rainbow sky. He didn't say much, but he stayed for coffee, listening as Jamie talked about his art. It wasn't acceptance. Not fully, but it was a step. Willow Creek faded, but its lessons didn't. Jamie and I built a life, not just for us but for others like us. He started teaching art to queer kids at a community center, his laughter filling the room as they painted their own rainbows. I volunteered too, sharing my story, helping kids who felt trapped like I had. We were proof that love could win, even against the odds. One night, under the Columbus skyline, Jamie pulled me close. "You changed my life. Small town," he said, his eyes bright. I kissed him, my heart full. "You saved mine," I whispered. And as we stood there, the city alive around us, I knew we'd keep fighting for love, for freedom, for every kid who needed to know they were enough. The rainbow flag we'd hung in our window fluttered in the breeze, a symbol of everything we'd overcome. Dad hadn't torn it down, and neither had the world. We'd built something stronger, something true, and that was worth everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.